Something very interesting came across my desk this week, and I thought I would share it with you because on the channel, we break down the top influencers, the best traders in the world. We look at what strategies they're using to make millions of dollars of crypto and potentially copy trade the ones that we like ourselves. And I have a strategy that I would love you to go analyze for yourself because it's actually looking so good that I'm going to be starting to do this strategy myself to get passive income on Bitcoin holdings. Now, it's not really that direct. It's passive income, yes, but it's basically off a stock. We're going to go deep into the details. We're going to talk about how it works. Is it a Ponzi scheme? There's a lot of doubters and a lot of haters out there. There's basically one camp saying this is the absolute future and the other camp being like, you're about to lose all of your money. So, of course, we need to dive into the details before we make decisions on our own. British Hodl over here on Twitter says, I've met a guy here in Dubai who has $4 million in Bitcoin cold storage, a little ledger device, and struggles to earn money. He makes about $15,000 a month, not through his Bitcoin, through consulting and coding to make sure that he doesn't have to eat into his Bitcoin holdings. He knows that Bitcoin is going to go from 4 mil to 40 mil if he's patient enough and doesn't have to sell it. But a lot of Bitcoin holders, like they're so pro Bitcoin and so Bitcoin maxi that they're like having to sell small amounts, 5%, 10% just to pay for their lifestyle and therefore missing out on those 10x gains. His family literally lives a subpar life despite having $4 million in Bitcoin. One conversation later, British Hodl spoke to his friend and introduced him to Charles Schwab and an OTC desk. And he sold 10% of his Bitcoin, which is 400,000 US dollars, into MSTY, which is what we're going to be talking about in this video, which is $19.90 a share. So he bought 20,000 shares of MSTY. So now he has $3.6 million of Bitcoin and $400,000 of MSTY, this stock. Now, MSTY's stock dropped $26,845 into his account after yesterday's dividend. That was the monthly dividend that this man here earned on $400,000. And so his income went from the $15,000 a month he makes from, coding and consulting to $41,845 this month. And he still holds his MSTY stock valued at $400,000 and he still holds his $3.6 million Bitcoin. And that 10% will continue to grow faster than the traditional finance benchmark of the QQQ and will probably grow at 30 to 40% the rate of MicroStrategy if he continues to pull out the dividend. Now, that is fascinating. It comes with a lot of questions and also a lot of doubt of, is this too good to be true? Here is Deku, the investor, saying, not a bad paycheck for doing nothing. Thank you, MSTY. Again, this really just feels like everyone pushing a pyramid scheme, but it's not a pyramid scheme. You don't get money for recommending people buying this stock. There's no affiliate, there's no referral commissions. And he made $3,000 in April's dividend payout. And Retire on Dividends, who talks about retiring on these exact things, says, what's better, the SPY, the S&P 500, or MSTY? And you can see here, he has gone through the math of putting $10,000 investment, both in the S&P 500, where the S&P 500 went up over this time. You can see these are the dates above here, over 1 year, 1.13 years total, $507 to $533 for the SPY. And MSTY actually went down from $21 to $20 basically. But have a look at the total return, 212% versus 7%. The average annual return, 173% versus 6%. And your 10 grand in MSTY, at least over the year that they're tracking this for, went to $31,000, where the SPY went to $10,700. And this guy, Ron, who's a Bitcoin hodler, just finished moving his entire 401k into the MSTY stock to cash in on these dividends. Barixis says, pulled the trigger on MSTY. It is a cash flowing equivalent to a rental property without the overhead headache. Please change my mind. Holding MSTY is in a tax advantage account has to be the cleanest money glitch I've come across, because that's one of the criticisms is you have to pay tax on the dividends that you're paid out, and therefore you're not making as much as they say you're making. But of course, that's the same tax with all income. Why you don't pay that tax if you keep it in Bitcoin, however, is because it's not realized gains. Barixis also says if MSTY goes to zero, which it won't, it would suck, but I would be just fine. For example, British Hodl's friend put 10% of his money in there, not $4 million in there. This is Michael Saylor on the Patrick Bet David podcast here, talking about if you have 100 vol, which is the volatility of a stock, you can generate 100% interest just by selling the upside So people like MSTY, all they do is just sell the calls and they sell the volatility and they generate a 180% dividend yield over the last year. If you don't understand what this means, we're going to break it down. But this is basically what MSTY does is they sell the potential upside, the volatility of a stock like MicroStrategy to people who think they can time the market. I'll go into detail, I'll break that down for you in just a second, but you can see this fits into the MicroStrategy Bitcoin ecosystem with Bitcoin is the long-term savings asset, the generational asset, and the foundation of wealth. MicroStrategy, which is Michael Saylor's stock, is the investment, modern day Berkshire and BTC Alpha. And then you've got MSTY here, which is the monthly income to pay your bills and fund your lifestyle while Bitcoin and everything else rises and accumulates underneath it. And if you have a look here, I asked ChatGPT that if you put $1,000 over the last year into Bitcoin directly, into MSTY without reinvesting the dividends, and into MSTY with reinvesting the dividends, here are the returns. So you'd have a 117% return on Bitcoin, more than doubling your money. You'd have 147% return if you're not investing the dividends, and which you could put those dividends back into Bitcoin, for example. Or you would have a 299% return for MSTY with the dividends being reinvested. Of course, past performance does not indicate future performance, whatever that quote is. It doesn't with Bitcoin, doesn't with any stock, not let alone MSTY. But at least this is very eye-opening for me, and I think very worth a lot of people at least considering making their own decision on. Stone Cold Option Stunners says MSTY. Below is a 3-year, very hopeful, its conservative projection with the lowest dividend paid to date and an average price of $20, which is the current price of the stock. Any MSTY investor likely has run similar models. It's not a short-term strategy. It's for the long-term income generating machine. And we can jump into this. It might be a little bit small, but basically it goes from 19 grand to 50 grand in the first year to 111 grand in the second year, which is 2026. You can see the years up here to 207 grand. So from 19 grand to 207 grand in 3 years based on projecting the past forward. And even if it doesn't go forever, Mina says, reminder, if MSTY returns 100% in 1 year, your initial investment has essentially been de-risked in 1 year, which it returned 180% in the last 1 year. Devoted Dividend Investor says, which one are you choosing? Talks about all the stocks and their dividends based on, I think, $100,000 investment, anything from $1,400 from the VU, all the way up to MSTY, which would give you $80,000 a year in dividend. Now, exactly how does this work? Is this just a giant Ponzi that everyone's just going to borrow each other's money until it all comes tumbling down and everyone is screwed? Well, let me explain it to you. MSTY generates passive income, which is the dividend payouts, by using a covered call strategy on MicroStrategy stock, which is heavily exposed to Bitcoin. So you remember that pyramid? This is based on the fact that Bitcoin is the modern day fire that's going to go up forever. MicroStrategy is basically a leverage bet on that. And then MSTY is a leverage bet on the leveraged bet. However, there's a lot less upside to MSTY, but a lot more consistency. So here's how it works. MSTY buys shares of MicroStrategy. They go and literally buy shares of MicroStrategy, a company that holds a lot of Bitcoin. It then sells the call options, I'm going to talk about what that is in a second, on those MicroStrategy shares. This means it collects a premium or cash from traders who are betting that MicroStrategy will go higher. These premiums are then distributed as monthly income through the dividends to the MSTY holders. Let me explain what call options are in a very simple way. I had a guy explain it to me this way and it made a lot of sense. So this is you up here. You are this fandangled fancy dog of an investor. And you have $1 million to invest. And just like we do on this channel, we like to invest in things that we have a little bit of inside knowledge of. Now, not inside trading, not the public inside knowledge, but a little bit like, oh, Alex Becker might buy this token in the future, or China might be buying Bitcoin in the future. We should buy it now. We're a real estate investor in this example here, and this is the town plan. Now, we've heard whispers, reliable whispers, that a Whole Foods market is going to be built on this square right here. And we know historically, when Whole Food markets are built in small towns, the price of the real estate around the Whole Foods will go up 30% because everyone who's healthy wants to buy from Whole Foods. In this example, one of these houses, one of these little plots is worth $1 million. So in example A, you take your $1 million and you buy one of these houses, you wait till Whole Foods has been built, and then you can sell your house for $1.3 million, cashing in $300,000. Of course, the Again, the critique here is you still have to pay tax on that because that is realized gains, but that's the same with MSTY, and it's going to be the same with everything that's not a long-term hold. But in this example, there's no tax. You make 300 grand clean. However, the real big brain giga financially engineered play should have been you take your $1 million and you go to 20 of these houses and you say, hey, I'll give you $50,000 right now. And all I want in return is the ability to buy your house off you in 1 year after the Whole Foods has been built for the current market price. So for 1 million. So if you're a resident of that house and you're like, oh, my house is worth $1 million, someone knocks on your door and says, here's 50 grand. Keep it no matter what. If I come back in a year or I don't come back in a year, that $50,000 is yours. But I have the right to come back in a year with $1 million in a suitcase and say, this is now my house. You're buying the option, a legally binding option, to buy that house 1 year in the future for the current market price. Now you do this with 20 houses and you spend your $1 million. Whole Foods gets built. All these houses go up. All 20 of them go up 30%. And now they're all worth 1.3 mil, which means they're worth 26 mil, but you have the option to buy all those houses for 20 mil. Therefore, you have a profit spread of $6 million from your same $1 million investment. That's a 6x on your return instead of a 30% on your return in inside trading. I just said that we don't inside trade, but trading on the knowledge that other people don't have. And obviously taking some risk. What if the Whole Foods plan didn't go through? You're going to be out of pocket. But this is what MSTY does. They buy, instead of real estate, they buy MicroStrategy stock and then they sell call options. The ability for people to buy those MicroStrategy shares off us in the future for the current price that they are now, whether they're up or down. And the money that they're paying for the option to buy them off us in the future is going and being paid out, distributed monthly as dividends to MSTY holders. Pat V says MSTY sells about $70 million in covered calls weekly, generating about 60 cents a share per week or $2.40 every month, which is why their dividends are 5 to 7% a month. That's $3.5 to $4 billion in annualized premium on a $2.6 billion market cap fund with an IV rank around 20. Few MSTY commentators highlight this income machine, focusing instead on the temporary NAV swings and DK concerns. For long-term MicroStrategy bulls, these are distractions. A controversial take: MSTY could outperform MicroStrategy over time. Unlikely? Yes. Impossible? No. And someone like Stacking Sats, who is a full bull on this, says that MicroStrategy and MSTY is a hedge against AI and robotics taking your job and future. Basically talking about how the job market used to be 100K to 250K, demand for software engineers per year, ChatGPT and Claude has hit the scene, and honestly, a lot of people have a shakier future. However, he's betting that Bitcoin and the Bitcoin ecosystem, something like MicroStrategy and MSTY, are one of the only things that are going to grow faster than AI and robotics. And that's the only way that you can get ahead in a world that is run through AI and robotics. However, there are a lot of doubters. This is Marco from Whiteboard Finance. He says, if you're selling Bitcoin to buy MSTY, you fall under a fool and money are soon parted category. Pay off your fiat debt, stack sats, which is Satoshi's parts of actual Bitcoin. Stop overcomplicating it. There is no free lunch. And he actually sold $42,000 worth of MSTY back to put into, I believe, it says he made profit, but maybe buying more Bitcoin. However, there are a few downsides. For example, the counterparty risk. You no longer are storing your own Bitcoin, but you're trusting in a third-party entity to do what they say they're going to do. Sekra says, the latest scam to dupe the gullible suckers and losers looking for a free lunch. MSTY, the fraud goes on. So these are the doubters, which there is some validity to this stuff, which you have to go and look into yourself. However, it's the same doubt that went into Bitcoin when Bitcoin was $100 per token. Priced in Bitcoin says, have fun with your yield max, MSTY. MicroStrategy is up 118% year over year, but MSTY is down 41% year over year, excluding dividends, which I'll get into in a sec. Add in dividends, post-capital losses, and tax. So he's talking about post-capital losses and tax. He's factoring that in. Looking closer to a 10 to 15% returns on MSTY, which is way less than the 118% returns on MicroStrategy. However, that is actually some pretty harsh math. And Ted Wagner points out, excluding dividends, it's all about the dividend. That's why people are signing up for the passive income. He says it's like comparing a Cybertruck to a bicycle, excluding wheels, and saying that the truck wins. Bitcoin Mind says, if you're selling your sats in cold storage for MSTY, you're completely lost the plot. And xpug.hodl says, MSTY is the new staking. You're going to get rugged and lose your money. Bitcoin only, referencing the DeFi farming where a lot of people lost a lot of money when that bottom fell out of that. But Bodhi says, to be fair, we actually know where the yield comes from though, trading the volatility of MicroStrategy, which in my personal opinion, most people like Xpug are just mistaken on where they are classing this asset. Michael R. Sullivan says both these things are true at the same time. MSTY is a better choice for someone that needs a consistent income right now. MicroStrategy is a better choice for someone who plans to hold Bitcoin for the long term. Can we stop with the infighting about it? You're both wrong, because you have to realize, just like in the housing example, when you have the right to buy someone's house off them for less than the market price if it goes up, when you're in MSTY, you are not getting the upside if Bitcoin and MicroStrategy skyrocket because someone's bought the right to buy that off you. So you're almost protecting your downside, which is why a lot of people are hedging, for example, taking 10% of their Bitcoin portfolio, putting into something like MSTY, so they don't lose all the upside and they still have 90% of their portfolio in it, but they get to get that passive income, like the guy who went from 15 grand a month to 41 grand a month just from 10% of his holdings. What are your thoughts on MSTY? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.